Well, each week a group of insiders joins me to offer perspective on some of the week's top stories. This week we've put together a special political panel to sound off on the midterm election results. Pleased to be joined this week by Faegre Baker Daniels LLP partner Murray Clark. Also, Indiana Chamber of Commerce President Kevin Breniger and Vox Global Senior Vice President Francesca Brady. And welcome one and all to the Insiders this week. I'll just start out. We'll kind of go around the horn on biggest storyline. There were a number of them at the federal level, state and local levels. But Kevin, your big story coming out of the results.
I think at the state level, it was the lack of change. A couple of incumbents that were already in swing districts got defeated, but basically Republicans are going to still have supermajorities in the House and the Senate. All statewide Republican office holders were reelected. I think it bodes well for Governor Holcomb's popularity and good for the business community in terms of we have business-minded, pro-jobs, pro-economy leadership in the State House that we will work with and continue to move Indiana forward. All
right, so not much change at the state level. Francesca, your take?
I would say at a national level, the Year of the Woman. So it's the biggest surge in female candidates that we've seen, kind of a recap back to 1992. And really exciting momentum to see some other first Native American women in office, first Muslim women in office in some states, a huge sweep for Democratic female governors. So really, I think, exciting momentum on that front.
Do you sense that having kind of a snowball effect? You get the publicity and the fact that it's happened, and really to have it continue to have an impact going forward.
I think it definitely will. I read an interesting stat that many women don't run for office, not necessarily because they're not qualified, but because they don't think they're qualified. A 2013 study showed that men are actually 50% more likely to run if they think they're underqualified. And I think we've seen this kind of breaking through and creating a confidence boost where kind of non-traditional female candidates will continue to run, which I think is really exciting for our country.
Yep. Murray, your big takeaway.
Well, I think that obviously Mike Braun winning, right? Republicans gaining a seat in the United States Senate in Indiana, and associated with that, really how strong the Republicans performed on Tuesday. So for the future, I think that bodes very well for Eric Holcomb. I mean, he's got extraordinary approval ratings, as Kevin mentioned, and really at this point in history, it looks like the Democrats have a significant structural deficit, which I think if you're a Democrat thinking about running for governor about Eric Holcomb, that's probably not very good news.
Yeah. Going back to the Braun-Donnelly race, a lot of people were surprised at the margin of victory too, to be sure, and the polling didn't seem to be accurate.
Right, second cycle in a row, and there's a lot of theories out there why the polling has been so off, and I'm not sure I know what the answer is. But that was the biggest surprise for me. I thought the Senate race would be much closer. I think both candidates and campaigns probably did, and most people did.
Yeah, Kevin, you mentioned the business community, the fact that Braun is a businessman, is a business person. Do you think that at the end of the day was something that resonated?
I think, well, certainly it resonated with the business community. I think, even though we have record low unemployment, people are still aware of and concerned about jobs in the economy. That stays pretty high on their, what's the most important issue list that they have. And, I think he presented himself well.
Let's look at the national level. I think the expectation, Francesca, going in was that Democrats would take the House, Republicans would probably hold the Senate. That's what happened. Anything else to read into those results?
I think it'll be interesting as we look at the Senate going forward. I heard an interesting analysis about sort of the short-term versus the long-term strategy in the Senate. And certainly in the short term, Trump's popularity bodes really well for Republicans. It will be interesting to see as our demographics start to shift. Indiana, like a lot of states, has seen growth in minority population. Our traditional Republican voter population is aging out. So as those demographics start to shift, what does the long-term long-term prognosis look like for the party, and how does that, what implications does that have?
Yeah. What do we think about how divided government will play out? The markets loved it. I mean, the next day, I think the Dow was up 500 points. But going forward, you've got, again, divided government. There's all this talk about potentially investigations and gridlock and all this kind of stuff. Murray, how do you see that?
and so that remains to be seen. I think the ball's probably in Nancy Pelosi's court, so she has a couple of different options here, and they've threatened to do some serious investigations. Hope they don't. I think there is a potential to work together to avoid gridlock, and they have some pretty quick decisions to make with regard to keeping the government working.
Yeah, well, and to Murray's point, I heard that the day after the election, Mitch McConnell went and met with Nancy Pelosi, as an olive branch with the message of let's see what we can get done together and find things that we can agree on. And but Murray's right; it's kind of in her court to decide what direction she wants to go.
In terms of activity and things that could have a big impact on, obviously, Indiana, trade, tariffs, those types of things, the expectation is that Trump theoretically could do those things through executive order, right? So wouldn't need necessarily congressional approval to do those things.
Well, and has already imposed big tariffs that route without congressional approval already.
Yeah.
When you talk about tariffs.
In terms of turnout, because that was obviously one of the big stories as well. I've never voted early in my life, but I decided to do it this year, and there were 400 people in line when I got there. So it was amazing. Do you think this is something that's going to continue? You think this was an anomaly, a one-off, or do you think that voter engagement is going to continue?
My hope is that it will continue. I think it was really promising to see the strong early voting turnout this year. I heard an interesting fact about young voters, which is this is the highest turnout election for 18 to 29-year-olds in midterms in history. I think 31% voted. So I think if we're looking to them as the next generation of voters, that's a really promising sign, and we hopefully can continue to see that trend and see that great turnout.
Murray, impact on the 2020 presidential race. We saw what happened in the Senate and the House. We look at governor's races. Republicans, I think, were happy about obviously getting Ohio and presumably Florida and Georgia and some of those states.
But sad about losing Wisconsin and others, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, I would go back to Nancy Pelosi. I think her approach going forward, which is actually what gives me some hope she'll have some moderation going forward, because I think the harder you go at Trump, I mean, if you're going to kill the king, you better kill him, because I think it just, the whole Kavanaugh thing excited Trump voters and probably helped Republicans, avoided the blue wave that so many pundits, had said would happen. So I think that it remains, and of course, it's the economy, stupid, right? I mean, if the economy stays strong, I think it'll be great for him. If it slips, who knows what 2020 will look like.
All right, start with you, Kevin, in terms of the big winners, or a big winner coming out of this year's midterm.
Well, certainly Mike Braun. I think that at the state level, Republicans in general, holding their supermajorities in the legislature, all statewide offices, and related to that, the governor himself.
Yep. Francesca.
I would say suburbanites. We saw them drive really an interesting shift in the House makeup, and I think it shows the power of the suburban voter. I also would echo with what Kevin said at the state level in terms of Republicans retaining control, while at the same time giving a shout out to J.D. Ford, who pulled off a pretty big upset in District 29, which was interesting to see.
Murray?
Well, certainly Mike Braun had a big day, but I would suggest to you it was when the smoke cleared, Eric Holcomb was the winner of the day. Again, I think he enjoys a great approval rating. We have this structural deficit, at least at this point in time, the Democrats have, and boy, you'd have to think twice about getting ready to run against him in 2020.
Thank you, one and all, for some great perspective. Kevin Brinegar, also Murray Clark, Francesca Brady, thanks very much.
You.
And we'll be right back after this.